Week 3 of the Iowa high school football season is upon us, and we might have some of the best matchups that we've seen all year. We're not going to waste any time. We're going to get right into it with some previews, predictions, and talking anything and everything from all 7 classes in the state of Iowa. But first, before we start, Nick, give me one player that you're looking forward to watching this week.
I think definitely the player I'm going to be looking at this week is Jackson Cherry of Webster City. I mean, we're definitely going to be getting into his deal later on when we talk about some of the matchups, but I mean, he is definitely the most dominant running back in the state. Webster City moving up a class, and they've been, performing really, really well so far. And he's going up against one of his first big matchups of the year. And like I said, we'll get into that here in a little bit, but I'm really excited to see, how he does when the lights are a little bit brighter. And who are you kind of looking at for this week?
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. When we were talking about this, that was the first guy I thought of. You brought that one up, though, so I'll pivot a little bit. Give me Brady Hetzel, quarterback from Lewis Central. I'll tell you what, that game, it's where I'm going to be, Lewis Central ADM. Like you said, we're going to talk about all these matchups later. But he's going to need to have a big day because ADM's going to score, and that's going to be one of those shootouts. So excited to get that one going and see how Brady performs this week. But without further ado, let's get right into it, starting with Class 5A. We got 4 top 10 matchups, I believe. Couldn't even fit all of them on our graphic. We got to keep a few of the really good games off. But starting with Valley at Johnson, and the road really doesn't get any easier for Valley. I mean, they've had a tough schedule, and now they get another top 10 team in Johnson. And Johnson, they're looking to bounce back after a tough loss to Cedar Falls, and obviously Valley's 5-0 versus the Dragons, and they need to get their offense going a little bit after a slow first few weeks. But a Minnesota commit, Jacob Simpson, has 5 of the 6 touchdowns for Johnson thus far, and really a must-win game for Johnson coming up. They got Ankeny, Hawkeyes, and Southeast Polk on the horizon, so really kind of a must-win heading into district play in the next few weeks. But I think Johnson's going to get that one done. I think Valley's offense has been a little scary for me, a little worrisome. Nick, what do you think for that one? And I'll let you go ahead and pivot to your game too.
Honestly, right here, I think I'm going to go with Valley this game. Picking Valley last week didn't quite go my way, but I'm going to go with Valley this week because I think that the coaching staff this week is really going to turn on the red alerts like it's go time. Like you can't start 0-2. It really puts you in a bad spot as far as playoff seeding goes. And what a way to come back then to get a big win on Johnston. You can never sleep on the Johnston Dragons. They had I would like to think an off week last week maybe, but I think I'm going to go with Valley this game and go right into it. And what you could probably argue is the biggest game in Class 5A this week, which is number 3 Cedar Rapids Prairie is heading out to Runnels to face off against number 1 Southeast Polk. This is just a huge QB battle with Moberly and Phillips, and the star receivers are going to be shining this game with the quarterbacks in this one. Southeast Polk's Connor Moberly against Ankeny. He went 272 yards, 5 touchdowns through the air. He even rushed one in. And Southeast Polk is 3-0 against Prairie, and their last 2 matchups were 41-0. So Southeast Polk really dominated this short, young series so far. But Prairie started the season hot. They beat the now number 5 Cedar Falls to start the season. Their offense has been really good so far. Casey Kelly, like I talked about just a second ago, he's 350 yards rushing, 6 touchdowns. He's tied for first in 5A for that regard, as well as all-purpose yards. So he has really been getting it done for Prairie. He's been a huge piece for this team. And this game, it's really hard for me to pick against Southeast Polk, like I mentioned last week. I think I'm going to go with Southeast Polk this game, but I would be very surprised if this matchup ended like the last 2. What are you kind of thinking?
Yeah, good point. You got to talk about Southeast Polk debuting the inaugural game in their new stadium. Yeah. I keep seeing stuff on Twitter how they're telling people to purchase tickets before the game. Don't show up and buy the tickets there because it's just going to be nuts. But I tell you what, the key to winning these tough road games against these top-ranked schools is having a good rushing attack and really controlling the clock. And that's what Prairie has. And Casey Kelly, like you said, just kind of the top-tier running back in Class 5A, and they're going to be able to control the clock. And if if they can do that, this game is going to be close. Like you said, I think this is going to be a lot closer than the historical matchups in this series. But I'm going to go Southeast Polk too, but I think it's going to be a close one. Transitioning into our final 5A matchups, we got a rematch from the playoffs last year where Cedar Falls won. They're heading out to Centennial. Again, our third of 4 top 10 matchups. And really the key is, can Cedar Falls keep the momentum going after a huge upset last week? You know, they lose week 1 to Prairie. You kind of think, oh, maybe this isn't a Cedar Falls team that we thought was going to compete this year. And then, boom, they bounce back and take down a top 2 team in Johnston. So, you know, they had 200-plus yard rushers and 4 combined touchdowns last week, and Will Remmert and Drew Gerardis. And I tell you what, Ankeny Centennial, they got a nice bounce-back win last week too. Trenton Smith threw for 309 and 5 touchdowns over the last 2 weeks, and they kind of took it to Ames. So they got a nice little build-up game to this big one at their place. So and Centennial's looking to get their first ranked win. So really a ton of storylines in this one. I'm going to go Cedar Falls here. I think that Cedar Falls is kind of setting themselves apart as one of the top teams, not only in 5A, but probably the best team out east. And I think they're gonna continue this streak against Centennial and take them down again. Nick, what do you think?
I'm going to go with Centennial in this one. I think that Centennial's game against Ankeny was a real heartbreaker, and Ames is a talented team. You know, they're not ranked, but they're still a good, solid football team. And, you know, Centennial really made a statement with that game, a lot of points in that one. And I think they're going to bounce back. I think they're going to start, you know, playing like the team that we kind of saw in the preseason that they thought they were going to be. I think they're going to really bounce back this week. And this would be a really big win for them to get on Cedar Falls. And I'll let you kind of take that and transition over to Class 4A now.
Yeah. Before we go to Class 4, I wanted to mention the other big matchups that we won't really talk about them, but number 9 Ankeny at number 2 Dowling, that'll be a good one. And then Kennedy at Linmar, a good bounce back opportunity for Kennedy, who's kind of started 0-2, but you know they got some playmakers on the edge and at quarterback. So those are the other games we're looking at in 5A. Just couldn't quite fit it on our sheet for today. But heading into Class 4A, again, like I talked about the game that I'm going to be at, Lewis Central at ADM. ADM, kind of the tale of two sides here. ADM looking to ride momentum. They're just starting off the year hot and just took over that number 1 spot in Class 4A. And then Lewis Central just looking for a bounce back and a perfect bounce back opportunity against the top team in your class. So like Brady Hetzel, 2 picks in the loss against Creston, but he played well in the win against Harlan, so you know he has it. Then obviously Owen Thomas, the captain of that defense, looking to take control and slow down what might be the best 1-2 punch in the state of Iowa in Aiden Flora and Brevin Dole. 877 combined rushing yards and 12 combined rushing touchdowns, and they're having no trouble adjusting to this higher class. I'm going to go ADM here. I think this is going to be one of those games that's like 49-42, just teams scoring at will. Nick, what do you think here?
I think I'm going to have to agree with you on this one. I think that ADM is looking like a really, really solid squad, like you said, with Brevin Dahl and Aiden Floor. They are ridiculous. I mean, you look at the Class 3A stat leaders, and you can see them all over the offensive top fives. And I think they have a really special squad out there this year. If I'm not mistaken, they made it to state last year.
Yep.
And I think they can make it even deeper and stay there, you know, another week out in Cedar Falls. And I'm really confident in this ADM team. I really think, you know, despite Lewis Central being who they are, I think ADM will take it there. And we'll kind of move over to our next game, which is number 10 Glenwood and number 3 Harlan of 3A. Harlan has dominated the matchup historically. They're 15-2 in their 17 games they've played against. This is an eye-catching QB battle for me. Glenwood, you know, they have Caden Anderson. He's been a star. He's got 405 yards and 4 touchdowns so far this season. Wide receiver Peyton Longmire, he's got 100 yards and 3 total touchdowns, and that was just last week against the then number 8 Atlantic of 3A. And they took 3 interceptions last week, and that's one thing I'll be looking for from Glenwood is are they going to be able to keep up that no-fly zone that they've kind of established there. And moving over to Harlan, they've got Will Arkfeld. He's, you know, after Tegan Kasperbauer graduated last season. That was the biggest question mark for them, was how are they going to replace a really quality player like that. And, he's picked up really well with this Harlan team being a leader. He's got 386 yards, 6 touchdowns, and he's been proving to be really solid, leading this very successful team in recent history. I'm also going to be looking for Noah Schmitz. He's got 138 yards so far this season. No touchdowns for him yet, but, I can definitely see him getting on the scoreboard for the first time this game. I think for this game, I think I'm going to take Harlan in this one. They're a really solid team, and despite being a class lower, I think that Harlan's got the star power to get this done. What are your predictions for this one?
Yeah, a nice bounce back. Not even a bounce back, a nice statistical game last week for Harlan over Denison Arkville, threw for 297. And then its top target, Cade Sears, 5 catches for 195 and 3 touchdowns. So they're kind of starting to click, which is scary. But I'm going to go Glenwood. I'm a big Caden Anderson fan. I think this is the game where the Rams really kind of make a statement and kind of flip that historical matchup and kind of prove themselves as a top team in 4A. Obviously, with Harlan being a class below them, that's just as evenly matched team, and that's a matchup that's going to be, they're going to be button heads for 4 quarters. But I'm going to go Glenwood there. I like Caden Anderson. I think they made a statement last week against Atlantic, and I think they're a sneaky 4A team that could really make some noise. But that's my pick there, and we'll transition to a matchup that's not on our graphic. We missed it, but we caught it. There's just so many good matchups last week. We were bound to miss one of them, and it's Western Dubuque and Xavier. And what a perfect bounce back spot for Xavier. Obviously, they lose the heartbreaker to Williamsburg, but there's no better game than this week to bounce back and prove yourself that you are the team to beat in Class 4A, and they get a chance to do that against a really quietly ranked Western Dubuque team. We haven't talked about them a ton, but they've been dominant, and they're led by Tanner Anderson. He went 12 for 15 for 182 in the win against Wahlert last week, and they got a running back in Grant Glouser, who is a stud. He ran for 230 yards and 3 touchdowns on the ground, and so that's going to be a good one. And talking about Xavier, kind of the pros that you learn from their loss at Williamsburg, Colton Beasler-Weber proved himself as kind of the star, the skill player that's going to surround Ronan Thomas. He had 216 on the ground. But the key is, can they stop another dual threat offense, kind of like Williamsburg? They're going to face Tanner Anderson and Glouser, kind of a team that's going to throw it and run it. And obviously Xavier's O-line, they got to bounce back. They allowed 5 sacks last week and 4 tackles for loss. So a good bounce back spot for Xavier, and a perfect spot for Western Dubuque to kind of prove themselves as an elite team in Class 4A. I think Xavier bounces back. I think they kind of show that they're still here in Class 4A, and so I'm going to pick the Saints. Nick, what do you got there?
I agree with you. I think that Xavier, they got punched in the mouth last week, and it was a heartbreaker, only a 1-point loss. But Williamsburg is a really, really good team. We had talked about before the game that it wasn't shocking by any. I mean, obviously, Xavier loses, it's still kind of a shock, but it's not like a massive upset by any means. And I think Xavier just pops right back, where they kind of showed us from week 1 as the dominant 4A team. And like you said, this is the perfect bounce back game for them. Another top 3 opponent that they're able to face off here with, and I'm going to go with Xavier as well. I think that they're not going to stay down for long. They're going to prove, despite all of the noise from the upset, I think they're going to say, hey, we're not gone. We're still a Xavier team that's going to be dominant, and that's kind of what I've got Xavier for that one for sure. Perfect.
And before we head over to Class 3, I just want to talk about North Scott and Assumption, another great game that we're not going to be able to talk about just because of the time restraints, but Kyler Girardi and Angelo Jackson, that's going to be a really highly anticipated game. And just want to briefly mention that we see that one and we got our eyes on that one before we hop over to Class 3A. Nick, where you're going to start that one off.
Yeah, so the first one we got here is number 2 Mount Vernon and number 10 Benton. Mount Vernon is fresh out of the number 1 spot after Williamsburg, huge win. This is the first true test of the season for Mount Vernon. They haven't had the biggest opponents in their first couple weeks, but this is really to, maybe quiet the controversy or the kind of disbelief or, suspicions about whether this team is legit or not. Joey Romberg, he's got 199 passing yards and a passing touchdown last week. Jackson Jaspers, he had 6 tackles and 2 tackles for loss last week. And they just need to keep this momentum going is the biggest thing. You know, they have the talent to make it extremely far. They're definitely a team that can make it to the Dome, but they got to keep the momentum going. They got to keep playing this great football that they're doing. And, you know, this is a great test. This is a Benton team that they can beat, I think. But, you know, they've really got to play the football that they know how to play. And Benton, they're extremely ground-heavy attack. They had 2 200-plus yard rushers last week. On the season. They're going to look to rely on this defense to keep this elite offense in check. Mount Vernon, you know, that's been one of the biggest things that's stuck out for me over the last couple of weeks is how great this offense is. And that's how you're going to beat them is you got to restrict that offense. Don't let them score so many points. And you even have Noah Steinberg returned a punt for a touchdown. So, you know, that may be a guy who's going to get some extra looks this week. He's got explosive speed to get that sort of return a punt like that. But I think for my pick for this one, I'm going to take Mount Vernon. You know, I think they've got a little bit of a something to prove after our 3A ranker dropped them down from number 1 to number 2. So I'm going to be looking for them to win this one. What about you?
Yeah, really nothing Mount Vernon did to lose the number 1 spot. It was more about everything Williamsburg did to gain it. So it's not like we're knocking Mount Vernon. We're more just giving the credit to Williamsburg. But I can totally see that as some bulletin board material for Mount Vernon. But nevertheless, I like these teams that are squaring off with the top squads that have good rushing attacks. Like you said, that's how you keep an elite offense off the field is you hold on to the ball. And with Benton being an extremely ground-heavy attack, you know, it's a recipe for success if you can execute it correctly. So I like the pick. I'm going to go Mount Vernon too, but Benton, obviously, this is their shot to kind of prove themselves. So we'll see if they can do just that. Moving on, Humboldt versus number 2 in Class 2A, Van Meter. Kind of an interesting matchup, one we're not going to see in district. Obviously, these are the non-district matchups we get to experience. The first ever battle between these squads via bound, and we're expecting a defensive showdown. Humboldt, obviously, they got 7 picks as a team so far, second in the state. And if this offense can get the wheels turning, this behind this elite defense, it's going to be a tough team to beat. No Lance Kuhn in the stat book the first few weeks. I'm assuming he's out with some sort of injury. Not sure his timetable for return. Obviously, one of the more elite running backs in the entire state. So hopefully he can get back on the field. But it looks like they're going to be without him for a little bit. So that kind of stinks. But Van Meter, they obviously switching teams. Ben Gordon on their side, he's a stud running back. He's setting 2A on fire. He set 1A on fire last year, so no surprise. 333 yards and 3 touchdowns already, and they got a quarterback in Austin Baumover who already has tallied 8 touchdowns and 260 yards, and they're feeling right at home in their new class. Got some nice wins already, and they're going to try and prove themselves and show that they can beat a top team in 3A, which would be very notable. So I think I'm going to go Van Meter here. I think no Lance Kuhn is kind of concerning for me, and I think a dominant team like Van Meter can kind of exploit that and put some points on the board against an elite defense. Nick, what do you think?
You know, I really like to go Humboldt in this one, but I think I got to go Van Meter. You know, Van Meter's been such a dominant football team for so long, and, you know, like you said, no Lance Kuhn for the Humboldt. The Cougars, I think they're going to be hurting with that. And I think that they might not be as great of a team as we saw them in the preseason because of that. But, I mean, obviously this is a great chance for them to, you know, prove wrong. You know, if they don't have their elite running back, they can still be a great team and beat great teams. But, you know, I'm going to go Van Meter with this one. I have a really great feeling about them. And we're going to move on here. We're going to go next to number 4, Webster City, hosting number 5 in 4A, North Polk. This is an undefeated top 5 matchup. The Comets making the trip to Webster City. North Polk, they have Isaac Zosk. He's 267 yards and 4 touchdowns through the air. 3 ranked opponents in the first 4 weeks for North Polk with Bondurant, Webster City, and Humboldt. Both of those last ones 3A ranked. So they've definitely had a tough start to the season, but they're making the most of it so far. I think that they can get a big win here. This would be huge if they can beat a great Webster City team, and we'll move on to Webster City. Jackson Cherry leads all rushing stats in 3A, 587 yards, 8 touchdowns, 10.7 yards per carry. They only have 5 passing attempts through 2 weeks, which is just a wild stat for a 2-0 team who's top 5. That just really goes to show it's not just Jackson Cherry getting all the carries. There's several other running backs in there that are also contributing. But, as I was kind of looking over Webster City's stats, you look at the leading defender, it's Jackson Cherry as well. I had no idea. He's got 14.5 total tackles and 5 tackles for loss, and he's a utility player. I mean, he's obviously making huge progress over there on the offensive side of the ball, obviously carrying it like crazy, being one of the best offensive players in the state, and even making a huge impact on defense. And for this one, I'm gonna go with Webster City. I really like this team. Jackson Cherry is a phenomenal player, and not just Jackson Cherry. I think this is just a phenomenal Webster City team. And North Polk is very talented. It'll be a very big test for them, but I've got Webster City in this one. What about you?
Yeah, I love the stat with North Polk and their non-district. That's an extremely tough one, and I'm going to go with North Polk just because they were able to beat a Bonner Ant team that has an elite running back in Titus Cram. So I think they're going to be well prepared, and I think their higher rank in 4A kind of proves themselves as who they are. And I like it. I like Isaac Zosky. I like the Comets. I think they've proven enough to this point in the year, and I think this is when they really go out and make a statement. And they've really got a lot to prove this week, and so does Webster City. And we're going to find out a lot about both teams heading into that game. So I'm gonna go North Polk, and I think Jackson Cherry is limited a little bit in that wing T offense from Webster City. But nevertheless, moving down to Class 2A, got more great matchups here. Starting with Greene County and 3A's Atlantic. Atlantic obviously looking to bounce back. They kind of got woken up last week against Glenwood. Kind of talking about Atlantic as a possible team that could go beat Glenwood. Did not do that. And then Greene County obviously losing week 1, and they kind of turned the corner. And maybe this is their time to kind of make a statement. Greene County beating Perry 55-14 last week. Gabe Ebersole 12 for 17 through the air, 250 and 3 touchdowns. And his number 1 target was Jack Hansen, who hauled in 160 of those yards. And obviously Atlantic, like we talked about, Zayden Parker, the sophomore quarterback, looked great in his debut. A little bit rocky in the second game against a really good Glenwood defense, so he's looking to bounce back. And just 3.7 yards per carry last week against Glenwood. So they're going to look to gain a more effective rushing attack against the Rams. And they allowed Caden Anderson to complete 90% of his passes last week. So Atlantic's defense is going to really need to tighten up against Gabe Ebersole, who has proven that he can be a threat through the air too. So that's really my key of the game. But I think Atlantic bounces back. I think Greene County, I think they slow down Ebersole, and I think Atlantic bounces back with Zayden Parker. They got some stars over there, and I think last week proves to be a little bit of a fluke game from them. So Nick, I'll let you take it over to your game.
Before we get to that, I'm going to tell you my prediction with Greene County. Yeah. Greene County, I'm going to take them. I think this is a really solid 2A team. As much as you hate to say it, the lower classes definitely don't get as much attention just because of the school population sizes and whatnot. But I really have been liking this Greene County team, kind of seeing them work through the season so far. And I think that the big offensive numbers, although Perry isn't quite a powerhouse team, I think that this is it's a really big positive for them, putting up 55 points. That's no easy task. And I think that they're going to take a big win here against Atlantic. And moving on down, we have number 9, PCM, headed out to 3A's number 8, Nevada. This would be a huge statement for PCM. Nevada is a great team, and they're looking to put a hurting on a smaller school again. PCM, you look at them, they had a 29-28 loss to Pella Christian, who's now number 3 after that game. Just 8 attempts through the air, so again, another team that we're seeing that's just not really throwing the ball. Adrian Robbins, 231 on the ground and 3 touchdowns. And they were up 21-7 at halftime. So, they had that game, but they just couldn't quite, keep it up going in the second half. And, that ultimately led to their demise. As far as Nevada goes, they won 42-7 over Roland Story last week. That is their back-to-back 30-plus point wins. So definitely putting up plenty of points, and the defense doing their job. Like I've mentioned before, I've really loved watching this Nevada team so far this season. Carson Stevenson, 189 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground. One of the elite athletes in the state. He is, you watch him, he always is putting up the big stats for Nevada. And the defense has yet to allow 10-plus points this year. That's really interesting, with such an offensive focus as far as stats go in football. It's awesome to see the defense getting some love and kind of performing. And this game, I'm going Nevada. I've always kind of preached my thoughts on Nevada and loving this team, and I think they'll take a big win here. We've talked about how just because you're going down a class doesn't mean it gets any easier. These ranked teams are just as good, and they can perform in those upper classes. I'm going to take Nevada, though, in this one. What about you?
Yeah, I think Carson Stevenson is quickly becoming one of my favorite players in the state, especially after that video that we posted of him, of his highlight run. Just a crazy freak athlete. And Nevada, they've had some really good teams over the years, but this might be one of their better ones, and I think they cruise in this one. I really like their squad. Obviously, their defense not allowing 10-plus points is extremely impressive, and with one of the best athletes in the state, I think they're going to be just fine in this one. But moving on to Class 1A, Nick, I think you were talking about possibly going to this one. I'll let you break it down and really tell us what to expect.
So, yeah, we've got the top team of Class 1A, Grundy Center, and the reigning Class A state champions. They're going to be hosting number 3, Pella Christian. So another big top 3 matchup like we mentioned before, just tons and tons of these huge games that are going to make or break seasons. This is going to tell us how legit is Pella Christian, being that smaller school out there. They're looking to prove themselves against a well-solidified top football team. Grundy Center's 3rd straight game against a ranked 1A opponent. All have been in the top 10 at one point. That would be Dyke New Hartford, Applington, Parkersburg, and now Pella Christian. Looking at Pella Christian, they won over 2A PCM in 29-28 last week, just like we talked about just a moment ago. That was a big win for them. Mainly a run offense first. They're going to really see that ground attack from them. Benny Skurs, 120 yards and 3 touchdowns on the ground this week. So I really like Pella Christian. They've kind of just popped up as this team that we knew they were going to be a solid team, but they've really shown themselves to be one of the elites. And moving on over to Grundy Center, speaking of elite, they made a statement last week beating up on Applington Parkersburg, 200-plus yards on the ground as a team, 7 different receivers caught a pass, and the defense has been stellar, 6 and 7 points allowed in their 2 wins. So they are not offering much breathing room for the opposing offenses. It's really hard for me to pick against Grundy Center. They're a really great team, and they've got that home field advantage as much as that affects the game. And so I'm going to go Grundy Center in this one, but I think it's going to be a bloodbath. I think Pella Christian is a really great squad that's going to put up 4 quarters of really good football, and that's what I'm going with. What about you?
I think Grundy Center, I think the train's kind of going to move on here. They obviously week 1, tough 7-6 win over Dyke New Hartford, and then they kind of got their feet underneath them in week 2, and I think that continues here. I think they're going to kind of prove themselves yet again as the elite team and the team to beat in Class 1A in their first ever year in this class. So I like that pick, Colin Gordon. It's hard to pick against him, one of the best quarterbacks in the state of Iowa. So I'll go Grundy Center as well. Moving on to our second and final kind of game to watch in Class 1A. 2A's number 7, Osage at number 7, Dyke New Hartford. Osage coming off a dominant win, and Dyke's defense has been stellar. What gives? Osage just scored 45 points. So we're going to have to see Max Knutson, 14 for 20 for 210 and 3 touchdowns last week through the air for Osage. And Madden Uhlenhop, not sure if I'm saying that correctly, but I love the first name, Madden. He caught 6 for 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. And then Dyke New Hartford, they've yet to play in a game where someone scores 10-plus points. I think their first game was 7-6, and then last week against West Branch, it was 9-7. So they've yet to had to use the second digit on their scoreboard. So, but Colin Meester, their quarterback, he's been solid, 11 for 19 for 132 last week. and 6 tackles for loss last week as a squad against a top 10 West Branch. And like we talk about, it's really about what gives. Osage offense has been proven to be pretty stellar, and Dyke New Hartford's defense is obviously one of the elite in Class 1A. So this is really a game about what gives, and I'm going to go Dyke New Hartford. I think their defense is one of the elite, and I think that's what kind of wins games in this, and I think they kind of slow down Max Knutson and Osage and get a nice win over a ranked 2A team.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you about, defense. That's one of the oldest sayings is defense wins championships, and I think that kind of lives up in this game. I think Dyke New Hartford takes the win. I think that their elite defense will, keep on moving. Osage, obviously an extremely talented team. I think this would be a huge win for Dyke New Hartford. I mean, they lost to Grundy Center in just a 1-point battle, so obviously, they're a very talented team, and I think they're going to show that taking a win on a ranked opponent in a higher class. And now we'll kind of move on down to Class A with number 1 West Hancock headed to number 8 Saint Ansgar. This is West Hancock's first true test. St. Ansgar gets a shot to prove themselves this year. West Hancock won 32-0 last year, so a dominant shutout performance from them. West Hancock is averaging a 50-plus victory margin in the first 2 weeks, so they are not holding back. They're really pedal to the metal in those first couple games. Mitchell Smith, 6 for 6 with 141 yards and 2 touchdowns. He is yet to throw an incompletion this year. They've averaged 12.7 yards per carry on the ground last week. So they are really moving the ball well. Obviously, when you put up 50-plus point victory margin from those first 2 weeks, obviously you're doing something right. And, we look on over to St. Ansgar, 42-7 win over North Union last week. I apologize if I'm saying this incorrectly. Jace Squiso, 7 for 11 with 106 yards and 2 touchdowns last week. 4 sacks as a team defensively, so they're getting it done on both sides of the ball. I think for this one I'm going to go with West Hancock. They've really dominated this series, and I think we're going to see something similar to the score that we saw last year with the 32-0. West Hancock has proved themselves to be so far the top team of Class A, and I think they're just going to keep that, keep the boat going. I think they're just going to keep on moving, keep showing that they're the top team and proving themselves again and again. And so that's why we'll go West Hancock this week. And who do you have for this one?
Yeah, I'm gonna stick with you here, West Hancock. I really think in Class A, it's West Hancock and then everybody else. Like they have proven themselves as the top team in that class, and rightfully so with obviously their year last year and what the numbers are putting up this year already. Only 1 touchdown on the board against them in 2 weeks. So extremely impressive. They returned 2 1,000-plus yard rushers, and they got Mitchell Smith at the helm, who's just a proven leader. So I really like what they bring to the table. St. Ansgar, obviously, with a shot to prove themselves. You never know. Those teams that go into these games with nothing to lose, you never know what can happen. But I like West Hancock in that. And moving on to our final Class A game, Woodbury Central at Logan Magnolia. A really interesting one here. Woodbury Central, 2 close games thus far. They've dropped 1 spot in the polls each week because of that. And Logan Magnolia, they kind of came out of nowhere, and they're quickly climbing our polls. So they split the last 4 matchups, and Woodbury Central won 41-6 last year. And Drew Klunder, their quarterback this year, threw for 370 yards and 3 touchdowns. So pretty good history for the Woodbury Central quarterback, who last week picked up a 39-22 win over Westwood. Klunder in that game had 170 yards and a touchdown. And Zach Butler, 28 attempts for 234 yards and 5 touchdowns on the ground. I believe 5 touchdowns was a school record. I did get a DM on IA Football. I believe that's what it was 5 touchdown school record for Zach Butler. So congrats to him. And then switching to Logan Magnolia, a really impressive 42-12 win over number 16 Kingsley Pearson. Threw the ball just twice in that game, and one of them was a 56-yard touchdown. So you know what kind of offense they want to run. They want to run the ball. They want to make you make mistakes. And really so a kind of a switch up in schemes for this one. Logan Magnolia obviously going to keep the ball on the ground, and Woodbury Central with Drew Klunder, one of the elite quarterbacks and probably the best quarterback in Class A. He wants to air it out. So like last week, a kind of a bipolar scheme here. I'm going to go Woodbury Central. I think Drew Clunder kind of proves himself, settles his feet, and obviously he's got good history against Logan Magnolia. So I'm gonna stick with Woodbury Central here. Nick?
I think I agree with you on this one. Woodbury Central, I mean, Drew Clunder was one of the top quarterbacks last year as well, and he's just showing that nothing has changed over the offseason. So I really like Woodbury Central in this one. I'm really interested in seeing, as we go through week by week, I love seeing these teams that are throwing the ball like ridiculous amounts of like 2 or 3, 5 times. And I think it's really interesting, but, with an elite team like Woodbury Central, I think they catch on to something like that. Their defense, I think, will put an end to that rush pattern, and I think that they're going to try and force them to air it out, and I think that will lead to mistakes, especially when you're not passing much. You're not getting a ton of experience when you put into the pressured situations when you have to throw the ball. It's just mistakes happen, and, that it just happens. So I'm going to take Woodbury Central in this one. We're going to move on to our final class, and we're going to head to the 8-man class, of course. Our first matchup is number 5 Waco headed to number 2 Winfield Mount Union, yet another top 5 matchup. This is a top 5 district matchup here. An 8-man, 2 teams playing very well right now. Waco has won their last 2 matchups, and this could very likely be a dome matchup that we see. These are Waco made it to the dome last year. Waco so far last week, 46-22 win over Iowa Valley. Iowa Valley, a solid team. Clayton Miller leading passer and rusher last week. Winfield Mount Union, they take a 78-16 win over New London. Jake Edwards was 7 for 8 with 210 yards and 4 touchdowns, and 3 of those touchdowns going to Cam Buffington for 140 yards. He's one of the stars of Winfield Mount Union. This one is really close. I think this is going to be another just fireworks show, and I'm going to go with Waco in this one. I'm taking the upset. I really liked watching the way that Waco played last season in the Dome, and although I haven't been able to actually watch any of their games from the numbers, they look like a really solid squad despite Winfield Mount Union putting up 78 points last week. I think that Waco can really get it done, but like I said, this is going to be a close one, a fireworks show. So, Cade, what do you got?
Yeah, definitely one of those 8-man games where you're going to see teams scoring at will, and I'm going to switch on you. I'm going to go Winfield Mount Union. They got the star, Cam Buffington, Iowa commit. I think this is when Winfield Mount Union kind of proves themselves as a top 2 team for sure in Class 8 player, and obviously getting a head start in your district is key going into playoff seedings. And quick note, Cam Buffington, Preston Rise, and Derek Weisskopf got named to the Butt Kiss Award for the high school category. So congrats to them. I saw David Eichholt posted only 51 high school players on that list, and 3 of them from the state of Iowa. So pretty impressive stuff for those 3, Cam Buffington being one of them. So I'm going to go Winfield Mount Union. I'm going to back the Iowa commit there. Our final matchup on this list, Lennox at Bedford. Time for Bedford to prove themselves. We got some comments on our social media. People wanted Bedford higher. Here you go. You get a shot against the number 3 team in the state in Lennox. And Lennox has won 5 in a row in this series. So looking to kind of switch that theme up. Lennox scored 50+ in both victories thus far, led by leading passer and rusher Gabe Funk, who has 9 total touchdowns so far. Bedford, they got 2 quality wins, one over a top 10 team in Moravia. So they've got their gripe to be a top 10 team, but this week they kind of got to really put that into focus. And they're a more run-focused offense. They have 3 rushers with 140+ yards in the season so far. And you know what? I'll take the Bedford Bulldogs. People want them in the top 10. It sounds like they're really interested, and so I'm going to back them. I'm going to and then obviously listen to our 8-man ranker, put them in the top 10 after they beat Lennox this week. Nick, you gonna back the Bulldogs? You're going to go with Lennox?
You know what? Just seeing all the comments that we've seen, especially for 8-man that doesn't get a lot of attention. We saw
love it. Yeah.
Sure saw a lot of the Bedford comments, and I'm riding Bedford, man. Let's go. I think that they're gonna come out hot. They want to win this game. They want to prove themselves, and this is no better opportunity than now. Lennox is a really, really good team, and obviously this is gonna be a dogfight here, and Lennox is gonna fight hard, but if they're going to bring the energy, then why not? I think Bedford can. If there's going to be an upset, I think Bedford can pull it off. So I like Bedford in this one. I'll agree with that.
Perfect. I love it. Well, that's 7 classes of high school football preview for this week. Be sure to leave a comment. Let us know what you think. Agree, disagree with us. We love to read you guys' comments, whether you do disagree with us or not. But thanks, guys, for tuning in, and we'll catch you next week and next Monday for the rankings review.